Hello and welcome to this BTEC National Health and Social Care exam paper walkthrough. Today we're going to look at Unit 4, which is Enquiries into Current Research in Health and Social Care. I'm going to attempt to walk you through this assessment in 15 minutes or thereabouts. Let's talk about the format of the assessment. So it has two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A contains material for the completion of your preparatory work for the set task, and it's given to you 4 weeks before Part B. It's worth remembering that that doesn't include any school or college holidays, so sometimes you have it actually for about 6 weeks. Part B contains unseen material that's given to you in the exam. So for your preparatory work for Part A, you do 8 to 10 hours of independent secondary research and 6 hours of monitored time preparing 4 sides of A4 notes. Part B, which is the exam, you have 4 activities worth 65 marks in total, and they're split into 3 activities worth 15 marks and 1 worth 20 marks. So let's talk about the preparation stage, Part A. So the first thing you need to do when you're given your pre-release material is read the research article provided. You need to do that several times. You really need to have a thorough understanding of exactly what that article is about. To support you with that, you should annotate the article and really get to grips with how each element of that research article links to your preparatory work and how it then links to how you're going to answer your exam activities. You need to use that article to look for possible sources for your secondary research. So are there any research projects mentioned in the body of the article or in the reference list at the end? You also need to pay really close attention to any key terms used, because those are the key terms you're going to use in your secondary research. You might find that there are sources that support or criticise the topic. And then the final part of Part A is to prepare. So that's your 6 hours of monitored writing that you would do in your centre. You can produce 4 sides of A4. I recommend that you type it rather than handwriting it. And you just literally make notes about facts, figures, data related to your secondary resources. That's all that's allowed in that. And you can also produce a separate reference list. So 4 sides of A4 plus a 5th side of A4, which is your reference list. So going back to what I said about the pre-release material, really important that you get to grips with this original research article. You need to read it at least twice, but I would suggest you're going to read it 3, 4, 5 times. You need to annotate the article, really draw out the key themes, what are the findings, what are the recommendations. And there's an example of doing that on the screen. And what we've done there is actually we have linked certain parts of the original article to the activities that they relate to. So for example, if there's something about the research methods used, then that's for activity 1. If there's something on why this research is so important, some evidence that you can use for that, that's activity 2. Activity 3, anything that talks about the impact on changes to provision or practice or any future recommendations. So the format of the exam paper for your Part B. As I said at the start, there are 4 activities. Activity 1 is worth 15 marks, and your response must cover the suitability of research methods in the original article. Activity 2, also 15 marks, and your responses must cover the importance of the research issue, and that's where you bring on your secondary research. Activity 3 is the one that's worth 20 marks, and in your responses here you must cover the effect of the research on provision and practice and any future recommendations for change. And then the final activity is 15 marks, and within that one you have some unseen material, so a case study that you don't see until the day of your exam. And your responses respond to that research proposal that's in the case study, and you need to offer your own judgments on planning considerations, ethical issues, research methodologies and research skills in the context of that case study. On to answering activity 1. Activity 1 will ask you how have the different methods referenced in the article been used to research the issue. In your answer you should consider the suitability of research methods referred to in the article, reliability and validity of the research methods. So you can see there I've highlighted suitability. So that's a key thing that you're discussing in activity 1. How suitable are the methods? I've highlighted in the article in blue. That's to remind you throughout the activities when you need to put your answer into context. So you're not just talking about the suitability of research methods in isolation. So not just the strengths and weaknesses of questionnaires, for example, in isolation, but the strengths and weaknesses of questionnaires in relation to the research area being studied. You also need to talk about reliability and validity. You must have reliability and validity in there in order to secure the higher marks. And then in green, I've highlighted the number of marks, which is 15, and an arrow letting you know that you have approximately 40 minutes to write your answer. So you are writing an essay. Okay, let's have a look at some exam goals. So these are our top tips for how to answer activity 1. You need to consider what research methods were used, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the research methods, and you should consider this in terms of practical, ethical and theoretical strengths and weaknesses. You need to consider if the sample is representative and generalisable. Is the research method reliable? What are your reasons for arguing why or why not? Is the research method producing valid data? Again, why or why not? And then you need to draw some conclusions as to whether this research method or methods are suitable for the research topic. It's really important though that you remember that you have to address all these points in the context of the article. So you need to relate your points to the article topic, the location and the participants involved. On the screen now is some example content for answering activity 1, and I suggest you pause the video so you can have a really good read of this. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but just to point out to you that the scenario is in green, so mental health services for young people with anxiety. So this example content that you might see in activity 1 is linked to research on that topic there in green. And you will see that I have gone through and talked about practical, ethical and theoretical ways in which the research methods used are suitable or not suitable. So pause that now and have a good read. Okay, on to answering activity 2. Activity 2 asks you, considering your secondary research, why is it important to research into the research topic? In your answer, you should consider secondary research and its relationship to the issue, an analysis of the effects on individuals, practitioners and or wider society. So here I've highlighted why is it important. Activity 2 is all about why is this research topic important. Then in the bullet points I've highlighted secondary research and effects on individuals, practitioners and wider society in yellow. So those are the things that you must have in your answer. And then again, I've highlighted in blue, relationship to the issue. This is to remind you that everything that you say has to be in the context of the research issue or topic. Again, 15 marks, so about 40 minutes for your answer. So let's have a look at some exam gold for activity 2. Remember, for activity 2, you need to have done your effective secondary research. So in your response, you need to discuss the importance of researching this issue based on the content of the original article. Then you can link to how the research articles you found in your secondary research also support the importance of this topic. You can also use your secondary research to provide examples of how this issue in the article affects individuals, which can be positive or negative effects, professionals, which can be positive or negative, and wider society. We've got some great examples of this on the next slide. Okay, so this is some example content of what I might expect in an answer to activity 2, and I suggest you pause the video and have a good read, and you might want to take a screenshot. Again, this is talking about research into young people with anxiety, and I'm talking about 2 pieces of research I found during my secondary research and talking about how they show the importance of the research issue and the effect on individuals, practitioners and wider society. Next, we're going to look at answering activity 3. Activity 3 asks, how could research into the research topic affect the provision of health and social care services? In your answer, you should consider the effect on provision and or practice, your recommendations for change in future provision and or practice based on your secondary research. Again, you'll see in yellow, I've highlighted the key things that you must cover. So the effect on provision and or practice, as well as recommendations for change in future provision and or practice. I recommend where you can to cover both provision and practice in terms of effects and recommendations. Again, I've highlighted secondary research in blue because you can bring in your secondary research again here, and that really helps to support any recommendations that you make. This activity is worth 20 marks, so this is the highest value question on the paper, and because of that extra marks you can give yourself more time, so around 50 minutes to answer this one. Okay, let's look at some exam gold for activity 3. This question is about understanding and explaining the implications, that means things that can happen as a result, of the research in the article and the secondary research articles. Provision refers to the type and range of services provided in an area, and practice is the care that service providers give within these services. So you have to consider the effect on provision and practice. And then you also need to make recommendations. These can be based on recommendations made in the original article and ones that you find during your secondary research. So you need to think about things like, does the secondary research support the recommendations made in the original article? If so, this strengthens the recommendations. Or does it refute them? Does it criticise any recommended changes? And then you can make an argument for what you think is the best recommendations. Again, I've given you some example content for answering activity 3 linked to some research about young people with anxiety. So you can pause the video now, but what you'll notice is the bold text in orange is talking about recommendations. So I'm saying what the implications are for provision, what the implications are for practice, and then I'm drawing out recommendations. Finally, activity 4. In activity 4, you will receive some unseen information in the exam in the form of a case study, and the case study will be a research proposal written by a researcher. In this case, this activity is referring to a research proposal by someone called Farah. I've highlighted her name in blue to remind you that you have to apply your answer to the context of what Farah has said. So you should include judgments on planning considerations, ethical issues, research methodologies proposed, and research skills needed. Everything highlighted yellow there is what you must include in your answer, and you need to ensure that you cover those 4 bullet points equally. Again, this is a 15-mark question, so you have approximately 40 minutes. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a case study. So I've highlighted some key things for you. So who Farah is working with, the purpose of Farah's research, the sample and the size, the research methods that Farah is going to use, and the timescales that she's proposing. Now that I've highlighted this and annotated it, you might want to pause it. So exam gold for activity 4. When you answer activity 4, these are the things that you need to get right. So you need to make judgments about how the researcher can effectively plan their research. So you need to cover the rationale, objectives, research methods, target group and sample, timescales, monitoring, and measures of success. You also need to consider some of the ethical issues that might arise. So that could be both generally applicable ethical issues and those that are specific to the research being proposed. You also need to look at the suitability and the effectiveness of the research methodologies the researcher has chosen. And if you want to make suggestions for improvements, give reasons why you're suggesting those improvements. You also need to look at what research skills the researcher will need, and they can be both, again, generally applicable, so organisational skills, time management, but also more specific to the research theme. So that might mean things like non-judgmental practice, analysing lots of data, carrying out a scientific experiment. Again, really important that you link all of your points to the case study as much as possible and ensure your answer covers the 4 areas of focus in a balanced way. So I'd just like to share with you now my final slide, which is an example of how to answer activity 4. I have given you content that relates to ethical issues, and you really need to pause this and have a good read and see how I've talked about ethical issues both generally and specifically applicable to the research that Farah is conducting, which is with young people that smoke. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this exam paper walkthrough in 15 minutes has been useful. See you again soon. Bye.